What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 best $200 old flagships. So I want to go ahead and update this list slightly, and I want to go ahead and start off with the Pixel 7. So this phone has been really impressive, just really a favorite of mine. I think should be a #1 consideration for anyone around this budget who really is camera focused. So you can find this used refurbished, 200 bucks. It's got the aluminum frame. It's also got the glass back. It's very premium feeling and looking phone as well too. It's also IP68 dust and water resistant as well. And this phone does have a 6.3-inch AMOLED display. It's 90 Hz with HDR10 plus, and then you have 1400 nits peak brightness with a 1080p resolution and 416 for the PPI. It's a pretty good display on here. I thought it was pretty decent as well in direct sunlight. If you're outdoors, I didn't have too much of an issue with this phone. And also just, holding the phone, it's pretty nice. If you don't have really big hands or you struggle, this phone it's a decent size, at 6.3 inches. So that's something that I really liked. Now, what's awesome about this phone is that you do have Android 14 on here in the Google Tensor G2 processor. You also have 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. So basically, this phone is pretty fast. I mean, it's got stock Android on here. It's a very clean operating system, and I had no issues with this Tensor G2 processor on here. So you can also do, some gaming on here as well too. I was able to play PUBG at HDR Extreme. So again, not, necessarily a gaming phone. I would pick another phone on this list for that, but performance on here is fantastic. I don't think this phone has any issues at all when it comes to that. The stereo speakers are really loud, so you get a good amount of bass, really good sounding speakers on here. You do get a fingerprint scanner. It is optical, and it works fine. I didn't really have too much of an issue with that. But what's really cool about these Pixel phones is that you get to test out, the beta software. So like Android 15 right now is in beta. You can test it out on the Pixels. So that's always the cool thing about these Pixel phones, is you're first to get the new software. So the star of the show is really the cameras on the Pixel phones. So it's got a 50 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot in 4K 60 with a 10.8 megapixel selfie cam, and that is also an ultra wide, and it shoots in 4K 60. The photos on here are absolutely phenomenal. The Pixel phones usually always win in, people's blind smartphone tests and stuff like that. It is a really, really great phone, whether you're in good lighting, low light, whatever. This is going to take some fantastic shots. Now, the Pixel 7 does have pretty good battery life. It's a 4,355 milliamp hour battery. It does have wired charging on here as well at 20 watts, and then you have 20-watt wireless charging, and you also do have reverse wireless charging as well too. And I really had an issue with the battery performance on this phone. It pretty much lasts a day for me. So I think overall this phone, if you're really into photos, you like stock Android, this is a really top consideration, I think. Alright guys, next is going to be the Galaxy S21 FE. One of my favorite phones on the list. This phone just got the One UI 6.1 update as well too, which was very exciting. And what I like about this phone is I think this is a better phone than the standard S21, simply because the battery life is much better. But this phone has an aluminum frame, plastic back on here, but it has a a soft touch to it, so it doesn't really pick up fingerprints. It kind of has a matte finish, and it's also IP68 dust and water resistant as well too, and it's very comfortable to hold. You also have a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display, 120 Hz HDR10 plus, 1080p resolution, and 403 for the PPI. It's a beautiful display, very nice slim bezels on here as well too, and overall no issues with the panel on here. Does fantastic in terms of indoor, outdoors is fine as well too. So I really like this display on here, very colorful. This phone got the Android 14 update, and it's been really fast, very speedy. This phone is going to get Android 15 as well too, so that's going to be really exciting. You do have the Snapdragon AAA processor on here as well. You have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. So on this base model, it's pretty fast. Like, this phone is really, really fast when it comes to pretty much doing anything. That's why I say at this price point, I love recommending this phone because it's just so much better than a Galaxy A55 or A35, whatever Samsung is selling in the mid-range department. This is just a much better phone in my opinion. Also, the processor on here is excellent. It has really good specs for gaming as well too. So whether you play in PUBG or Call of Duty, whatever you pretty much throw at this phone, it's going to do a fantastic job. Like PUBG plays at HDR Extreme. And then the speakers on here are pretty decent as well too. You got stereo speakers, and this also has pretty much all of the flagship features when it comes to the software, like Samsung desktop support is on here as well too, which is really nice. You have an optical under the display fingerprint sensor, which works no problems. And this phone, I think, still takes really great photos, as you guys can see from the stills here. You have a 12 megapixel standard and an 8 megapixel telephoto with 3x optical zoom, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and then a 4K 60 video on here as well too. You have a 32 megapixel selfie with 4K 60 video as well. And you can see from the shots, you get some pretty good photos out of the S21 FE, and good lighting is great. And even in low light, it's still pretty decent. So this is a phone that I really like as well too for pictures and video as well. Solid. So honestly, it's a fantastic phone when it comes to photos. And battery life, like I said, it's much better, I think, than the standard S21. It has a 4500 milliamp hour battery with 25 watt charging and wireless charging and reverse wireless charging on board. So overall, I think this is an excellent pick for 200 bucks. All right, so next is the iPhone 12. So the iPhone 11 was on this list last time, but now the 12 has come down in price to around 250 bucks. So this is a fantastic phone. I would much rather you get this phone and spend, you know, the little extra money because it's going to get, you know, more software updates than the 11. So this one has an aluminum frame. It has more of a modern, you know, iPhone look. It's also IP68 dust and water resistant, and it has kind of like those sharp kind of boxier edges on here, but it is a somewhat smaller phone, so it is pretty easy to hold with one hand. Now this phone has a 6.1 inch display. It's the Retina XDR OLED display, 1200 nits at the peak brightness at 6.1 inches. So not a massive screen. I think it would be more compact these days. So it's 1170 by 2532 resolution at 460 for the PPI. It's a very nice display, very nice high quality display here. Very good resolution on here, very clear. And yeah, I absolutely love the display on here. It's fantastic. And the only thing about this phone is that they never added, you know, 90 hertz or 120 hertz or anything on these older iPhones. But they're still pretty smooth for the most part. This phone has the latest iOS 17.5 update and is running the Apple A14 chip, which is still very fast. If you benchmark it, it still performs really well. So for games like PUBG, it's still going to do a fantastic job, still playing at HDR Extreme at 60 frames. And you have 64 gigs of internal storage and 4 gigs of RAM, which I think is a little bit low here in 2024. So if you take a lot of videos and stuff like that, you might want to upgrade to the 128 gig model because 64 gig might not be enough. So you do have pretty decent speakers on here for the size of the phone. It's a good amount of bass, and then you also of course have Face ID. Now this phone's cameras are still pretty solid. It's got a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot in 4K 60 with a 12 megapixel selfie that also shoots in 4K 60, and you get some pretty good shots out of the iPhone 12. I think I was actually pretty surprised even when I compared it to the iPhone 15 Pro. It did a pretty good job at side-by-side stills. Now, of course, when you put it in like a low-light scenario, then you can kind of see the age of the phone. But besides that, in good lighting, you will get a fantastic shot with the iPhone 12 and also very good video as well. So this phone's battery life is just okay. It's a 2815 milliamp hour battery, and my battery health I think is around 86 or 87%, and it does pretty decent. I think if you're gaming, you're definitely gonna have to charge this phone, but for a light user, this should be fine to get through the day. You also got the MagSafe charging on here, so you can attach the MagSafe accessories and stuff like that, and you also have your standard wireless charging. All right, so next is the LG V60. So this is still a fantastic phone, and it's kind of a niche phone for a lot of people because it's a very powerful phone. Now, of course, LG's not making phones anymore, so this was their, you know, kind of last phone. It got the Android 13 update, which definitely gave it a lot of life, so you can kind of use it for a pretty long time and not have to really worry about it software-wise. But this phone is really built like a tank. It's got the aluminum frame, glass back, it's IP68 dust and water resistant. and it's just really solid. You can find these for 189 bucks these days. It's really cheap. And then you also have a 6.8-inch OLED display. It's HDR10 plus, 1080p 395 for the PPI. This phone does have a dual screen case attachment that you can find used online for maybe like 50-60 bucks. And the screen on here is great. The only thing I think with this display is it doesn't have 90 hertz or anything like that. So it's still a smooth display for a 60 hertz panel, but it does look really nice. So like I said, last major OS update was Android 13. It has the Snapdragon 865 on here. Now, what a lot of people like about this phone is it does have micro SD card support. It's got 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. So this phone is still blazing fast when it comes to gaming performance. You know, you can play PUBG at HDR Extreme, pretty much anything. And you also have that expandable storage as well too. And this phone does have a headphone jack with a quad DAC. So if you're, you know, into high quality audio listening, you definitely will, you know, like this phone for that. But like I said, this is just a very powerful phone for, you know, this price point of under 200 bucks is actually kind of crazy. The speakers are pretty good on here as well too. Has a good amount of bass, gets fairly loud. And then you also have the under the display fingerprint sensor, which is fine. It does work. It is an optical one, but it does work if you apply just a little bit of pressure. So the cameras on the V60 definitely have aged. I can tell just, you know, looking at the shots compared to the newer phones. I think the biggest area where the cameras have aged is really low light. I think if you're in good lighting, it still takes pretty great photos, I think. But yeah, anything kind of low light, you kind of see the images are a little bit softer, a little bit grainier, stuff like that. So it has a 64 megapixel standard, a 13 megapixel ultra wide, and a 0.3 depth sensor. It's got 8K 30 video with a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. So the cameras on here, like I said, they are fine for the most part in good lighting. But if you're in, you know, low light, you'll definitely notice the quality, you know, going down a little bit. Battery life is still phenomenal on the V60. It's got a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. You also have wireless charging on here as well too. And this phone easily lasts all day. So it's just one of my, you know, favorites to pick up these days for anybody who I would say is a power user on a budget. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than this phone. All right, so if you're willing to go, you know, with a really old flagship, the Note 10 Plus is a phone that I would definitely recommend. I've done a lot of videos on this. I even did a day in the life with this phone recently this year, and this phone still is amazing. If you guys check out those videos, I'm always impressed with this device. Again, you can find it, you know, 200 bucks easy. So it's still got a very beautiful, very timeless design here. Aluminum frame. It's got the really cool design on here as well too. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. And then you also have, of course, the built-in stylus, so you can use it to take notes and draw or do pretty much anything with. And then this phone, it does have a very beautiful display still. It still looks very modern for a phone that came out in, you know, 2019. It's got a dynamic AMOLED display. It's HDR10 plus. Got pretty slim bezels on here at 6.8 inches. It's 1440p at 498 for the PPI. So just a really nice, beautiful high-res display on here. This phone got its last major OS update with Android 12, One UI 4. Now, honestly, software-wise, it doesn't feel really dated at all. One UI 4 is not that much different from One UI 6 besides the AI features. But everything like Samsung desktop support, applications, you know, everything still pretty much works on this phone. No problem. So you also have Snapdragon 855, micro SD card support, and what's really awesome is the standard version is 256 and 12 gigs of RAM. So out the box, you get a lot of storage with SD card support. And this phone still plays pretty much anything. It's still really smooth. You can still play PUBG at HDR Extreme. Pretty much most games work really well. So it's not really a slow phone at all. It's actually very fast still. So the speakers are pretty decent on here as well too. You get the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, which works really well. It's very fast. And then also this phone, again, has the same kind of issue like the V60. In low light, it doesn't do that well, but you know, as you can see from the shots, if you're in good lighting, it takes fantastic shots. It's got a 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto with 2x optical, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. It has a 0.3 depth sensor, and it shoots in 4K 60. a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. As you guys see from the shots, like I did a whole vlog with this phone as well too. It did a really good job, I thought, especially for the price point of this phone. So it can take some pretty good shots if you're in good lighting for sure. Now, the battery life is okay on this phone. It's a 4300 milliamp hour battery. It's got 45-watt charging. It's got wireless and reverse wireless charging. So if you're not a heavy gamer, you can definitely get through a day with this phone without having to charge it. But yeah, just note that if you kind of game heavy, this is a phone you're going to have to charge for sure. But I think this phone is still really good for the price point. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching. What phones would you put on this list? And I'll catch you guys in the next one.